Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fall. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
All things Randi at randyrhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
So this story was breaking all over the weekend. Malcolm Nance went on AM Joy, and he wanted to speak to the president.
And let me speak to them, because I am a Navy senior chief, and I come from a family of chiefs. And this is about a chief, okay? You have to stand for my Navy. You need to defend our institution. The President of the United States is using undue command influence, and there is not a chief in this Navy that would allow that without saying something to the wardroom. So I expect the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy to throw his anchors down and stand against this, or you can all resign.
And basically, this is what happened. We do have a resignation this morning of the Secretary of the Navy, who, by the way, doesn't have clean hands in this either, as most senior members of the military never freaking do. But I got to tell you that this story gets even worse, okay? It's not just Eddie Gallagher's war crimes that Donald Trump wants to pardon or did pardon. It's also there are other war criminals, okay? And just for context, in the past war years, okay, 150 Navy SEALs have been stripped of their trident, which is a little pin that signifies that they are indeed a Navy SEAL. And the issue here was whether or not Gallagher was going, because Gallagher went on trial. They acquitted him of the murder of the little girl. They acquitted him of the murder of the little boy who was in our custody, who he used his own personal hunting knife on. This was a wounded boy already in our custody being held captive. Eddie Gallagher decided he didn't like this little boy for whatever reason. And so an unarmed kid who was in our custody, he pulled out his own hunting knife and he stabbed the boy in the neck and chest, and then held the boy's dead body up to a camera, took a picture of his, quote, kill, and called it that, and texted it to his friends. He was acquitted of this. So he was found guilty of some small crime. And when you are convicted in a court-martial, then post-court-martial, if you're guilty of anything, there's a review. It's a mandatory review. And the review seeks to find whether or not you are still suitable to be deployed for a sixth time, which is insane. And during this review process, the President of the United States wanted to end it. He tweeted that they were not gonna, that this review, no matter what they found, the president was going to give him his trident pin, and he wasn't going to remove him from the Navy. He was going to remain active duty. That's the way he wanted it, by tweet. The Secretary of the Navy, instead of going to the Joint Chiefs, which is where he was supposed to go next in the chain of command, he went personally to the president and skipped a person in the chain. And what the Secretary of the Navy was trying to do with the President of the United States was go behind the backs of other people in his chain and make a deal with the president that they would conduct the review, which the president did not want, but it would already be a preconceived conclusion that the review would be for appearances only or a show trial. And the Secretary of the Navy, Mr. Spencer, got caught doing that, working through a back channel to avoid his chain of command and to have a review with a preconceived conclusion happen for show only. This is total chaos in the military. Total freaking chaos. That you would have the Secretary of the Navy believe that he has to somehow go to the President of the United States and get the President to sign off on a show trial because the President has already signed off on this man's innocence and this man's staying in the military and no review. And even though it's Navy protocol, it's just standard operating procedure, which everybody in the military knows what SOP is, right? And so they were all trying to please the president in some just chaotic stuff inside of the Navy SEALs. This was SEAL Team 7. I also want you to know there are other stories, okay, that the president inserted himself into. There's a guy named Lieutenant Lawrence. I don't know if you're familiar with Lieutenant Lawrence's story. Lieutenant Lawrence was only on the job. He had 3 days of experience. 3 days of experience leading a platoon. And suddenly these mass murders occurred. And Lieutenant Lawrence's own men also wanted to testify against their lieutenant, their platoon leader. So his men did testify, and they testified that one of the first things that Lieutenant Lawrence told the platoon was that they should conduct these night raids to terrorize the civilians in Iraq, especially the children. Terrorize the children. So one of his men told Lieutenant Lawrence that there were 3 men on a motorcycle about 200 yards away, and he should be cognizant of the fact that there were men on a motorcycle nearby. And Lieutenant Lawrence instantly gave the order to shoot them. His platoon refused the order. They refused to fire. They said at trial there was no threat from those guys whatsoever, Staff Sergeant Danielle Williams said. And we refused to fire. So Lieutenant Lawrence got on the radio and he ordered a truck that couldn't see these guys to move in on these guys and open fire on these 3 men on motorcycles and ordered them murdered. And that happened. Then Lieutenant Lawrence falsely told his commanders that the local villagers carried away the bodies of the men on the motorcycles. But his own men turned him in, and 9 of them testified against Lieutenant Lawrence. Lieutenant Lawrence was also pardoned by the president. He went on Fox and Friends too on Monday, and he said, "I'm actually proud of everything that happened to me." Now, he lied, and he said that there was some backfire from the motorcycles, and he thought he was being shot at. None of that was true. 9 of his platoon members testified that they posed no threat. There was no backfire. The motorcycles weren't running, and that he then radioed to a truck to come in, and they said it was straight up murder. So there's another guy, right? Then you have Gallagher. Then you have another one. You have a Major, Matt Goldstein. He's charged with premeditated murder. He actually shot an unarmed man who was actually naked and said he was in fear for his life from a naked man. And then after he did it, he realized what he had done was murder, and so he decided he would burn the man's body. This happened in Afghanistan. So he first buried the naked man in a shallow grave, and then when people started to question his murder, he went back to unbury the man in the shallow grave and incinerate him. This is another one. And then there was another guy named Ben Henna, a war criminal, Michael Ben Henna. He had murdered a guy named Ali Mansour, also an unarmed naked Iraqi, shot him in the head and chest. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.